So we have our image texture that we made here. I'm going to hit new. We can just have it at like 2048 by 2048. You can make it however big you want. I guess that's a big enough size for what we're doing. I'm just going to call it like whatever. Just like, I don't know, cube, shadows. There you go. And I'll hit OK. Then what you could do here is drag this out to a mix node. And we're going to plug this in to the FAC. And we'll shift click on that to see what it looks like. Obviously nothing here yet. But basically what this is doing, if we shift click on just the texture and we try to draw with it, well, let's see if this even works. Yeah, the unwrap didn't really work that well, so I'm just gonna Control E, mark seam, and unwrap it like that. So now we have something better. Okay, so as you can see here, when I draw, we have white and we have black. And you can change your strength up here as well if you want something more harsh. Or I usually like to just keep it at 1 or like 1.4 to be honest. Or even like 1.5. But basically the point is, since it's black and white, when we drag it into the FAC, the A values are the blacks and the B values are going to be the whites. So if I shift click on this, and make sure whenever you're drawing on an image texture, select the image texture that you want to work on currently. So if I draw here, as you can see, it's becoming gray because we have gray as our color here. And I can switch it to anything else. And now we run into our first interesting thing here, which is since we did the local gradient first and we did the drawn shadows and ambient occlusion second, we see that the gradient isn't affecting this newly drawn on stuff. Like it doesn't change color down here, or change value to a darker color. So this is where it becomes personal preference, right? I could do either or. If you want, you could have it so that your drawing is affected by the gradient by putting it before. Or if you don't want it to be affected at all, you can put it second like we did here. It's up to you. Maybe, I guess for the purpose of this tutorial, I'll show you how to flip things around. It's not that hard, you just want to basically think about it logically, right? We have our result coming into here as the A, so let's just sever that. And I obviously want to bring this somewhere before here, but not before the color. So we're just going to position this like before right here. And then I want to use the color right here into the A value. And then as you can see here before, we have the color going into both the color here for both these hue saturation values. But now since this is the second one in the chain, we want this to be here. And yeah, so that's basically how it works. So if I shift control click here, as you can see now it's affected by a gradient. Okay, so I showed you how to flip things around it that way, but there's actually an even easier way to do it by using node groups. If I select a group of nodes, like if I just select one node here for the RGB node, and I hit Control G, it creates a group. And what that does is, think of it like a reusable component, right? We're making a shader and we're using different components for it. So when we put it into a group, it's like we have a base color component. So I can call this a base color, and then I can just change it to whatever I want, right? And that's not very mind-blowing, right? But basically, it's more mind-blowing when we have, for example, multiple objects, right? So let's say we had like multiple cubes. Or an object that was like completely different and like unwrapped differently using a different texture. We could have them using different textures, but the same node group. So let me explain that, because that's a mouthful. Basically, if we have this and we create a new texture for it, completely different texture, right? And for this cube as well, if we make a new texture, and this is just something completely different, right? Now, even though these are different materials, we can hit Shift A here and type in base color, and we get our node group here. And we can do the same for the cube here. And so basically, what is happening over here is that this node group that we made is kind of linked between all of these objects, right? So if I go here and I change the color, we can see if we go to our other object that's using a completely different material. This is material .002, this is .001. We can hit Control Tab here and we can see it changed to blue here as well. So obviously if you like plug it in, you can see it's blue. and it all moves on its own. And if you tab in, you can change it like this, and they all have the same values in the node group, even though they're a different material. Right, and before we go any further, what I want to do is make some more node groups here. So we can put this into a group, for example, by hitting Control G, then hit tab again. Then we can call this drawn shadows AO. I think you could scale this out a bit here. So this becomes our second component. And then we want our third component to be all of this. So I'm going to select all of this here, hit Control G, and then tab out. And now we've reduced our shader to literally just 3 nodes, which is really cool. One thing I want to tell you about here now is, let me just rename this to be local gradient. So, okay, what I want to show you now is if I add a local gradient here, right? And we'd have to drag it into both color slots because we have 2 slots that are in the input right here. As you can see, it says group input, and we have the inputs for the hue saturation value on top and bottom. So that's basically how that works. So let's say we wanted the gradient to be different between these 2 objects. So for example, like right now, if I move around the gradient here in the node group, you can see it's doing it for both of them. But what we could actually do is, well, there's a few different things we can do. The first thing I want to show you is that you can tab into any node group and make any value customizable for each node group. So for example, let's say I was adjusting the values here and I don't like how it's adjusting the value for both of them, right? I wanted to just do it for one. What you could do is drag these value parameters here and drag them in to the group input, to these empty sockets. What it's going to do then is, if you tab out, you have these value sliders here, which you can then adjust individually while still using the same node group. So if you like obviously move it inside the node group, if you do anything inside the node group, it's still going to affect both of them, but anything outside the node group is going to be just completely local, right? But let's say I want it to be so that when I adjust inside the node group as well, they are individual, meaning they don't adjust at the same time, like both of them. What we could do then is go here, and if you click on this 2 icon, basically what this means is that there's 2 objects using this node group, or 2 materials I should say. This cube and the sphere are using this node group. So if I click on the 2, it'll make it its own, and then tab, and now anything you adjust here is going to be separate. We've completely distinguished the node group from the node group here. And so yeah, that's basically how it works, how node groups work pretty much. You have your inputs and you have your outputs. So now I'm going to delete these 2 objects here, because that has been explained. And now what we have is our 3 layers, very neatly organized. We have base color, drawn shadows, ambient occlusion, and local gradient. So obviously for this, I got kind of sidetracked, but what I was saying was, yeah, basically for this type of object, we don't have any like cavities where we'd have to draw in ambient occlusion or anything like that, but we can just make believe or pretend. So what I'm going to do here is drag this group input, which is going to be the base color that we have here. If we tab in, I'm going to use this input as the B value, and this is completely optional. If you want it to stay as just like a solid gray color or a solid red color, you could do that. But if we drag in here with the A, what we could do is use our hue saturation value trick again. And what that's going to allow us to do is basically, if you decrease the value, you can see we could do it more dynamically, right? So now it isn't just like a solid color, meaning if we change the base color to like red, it's just multiplying the red. Whereas before what we had was, we had something where no matter what, it was going to be just like this red color, right? Like no matter what we change it to. So yeah, it's just pick your poison, like what do you want it to look like. Usually I use the hue saturation value, but it doesn't always give the best result for what you're looking for, right? So you have to be careful about that. So now I could just draw all this away. Let's say we had like some sort of AO like down here. When I say AO, I mean like ambient occlusion. by the way. And so yeah, that's how I would work. There's also another layer I like to add that's extremely similar to this one, which is the drawn highlights. So for a cube like this, there actually is more application for like drawn highlights, because we could highlight these edges of the cube. So how we want to do this is, well, if we want it to be before the gradient, it's going to be a little more tricky here. It's actually not tricky at all, because I'm going to show you how to do it, but basically, as you can see here in this drawn shadows AO, it's a little weird because we have two results coming out. That's because the group output, for some reason, is going to two results. So I'll show you how to fix this really quickly. Just go here, sever one of the connections. Then if you click on this group output thing, I'm pretty sure if you scroll here on the side with the N panel, and if you don't see this panel over here that I'm hovering over, just hit N and it'll appear, and go to group. You can click on this second result and just hit the minus key, and then it's gone. So now the issue we had before the result going into both color slots, because as you remember, we have two hue saturation value nodes here. So I'm just going to plug that back in. I might be going too fast here, so message me on Discord if you guys have any questions. This stuff is like really important for doing any shader work, so I hope you understand all of it. But basically now what I want to do is I want to duplicate this draw shadows node, because what we're going to do is we're going to use it for highlights now. So the issue is we can't really drag and drop it in the intersection here because there's two connections. So what we could do is we can shift right click, and what that does is it gives us an intersection point where we can then place this right here in the center. So as you can see, it's not doing much right now besides like further darkening this, because we haven't changed the image texture. But what I'm going to do is for this image texture here, and first of all we should hit this 2 key so that it becomes its own node, not linked to this one at all, and we're going to call it drawn highlights or whatever. It can be drawn anything, honestly. Basically all this is, it's not necessarily highlights or shadows, it's just like drawing anything onto the model that you want. Like for example, in this character model that I'm working on, I made an image texture just like this setup, and the purpose of it was to add these gold strands, if you want to call it that here. If you look at the jacket, like all the gold that was drawn onto the jacket was by using a method like this. So yeah, we could X out this image texture, hit new, let's just add a new one, let's call it highlights, hit OK, and let's change the hue saturation value to something high, like 1.4, so that now it's above 1, so it's going to be making it brighter, right? So now if we draw, we can add in nice highlights like this. Obviously you should probably use a drawing tablet if you're going to do this, but I'm just trying to show you, like, for purposes of explaining, not to actually make something beautiful right now, but just to like show you how it's done. And that's about it for those two nodes. The next layer I want to add is an overall texture. Shoot, we have this like snowman over here that I do not know how to get rid of. Let me see. Okay. Alright, so the next one we want to add is going to be an overall texture. There's a lot of different ways to do this. Personally, what I love to do is I have this texture saved onto my PC. I'll try and give a version of it to you guys so that you can use it yourself, but basically all I do here is I just open up the texture. I call it like weird texture for some reason. I can't be more creative to think of a name. But basically what we're going to do here is drag this out to, you guessed it, a mix node once again, and what I want to do is plug this into the B value. This is really easy. We're just going to hit soft light as the as the blending mode. So then if you shift control click on that, we can see we've added the texture to it. So this, as it is, looks a bit weird because of a number of reasons. There's a lot of different ways to use a texture like this. Personally, what I like to do is if we control T to get the mapping nodes, I like to use window. What that does is basically anywhere you look, the texture kind of stays the same. It kind of has this like cool effect that I like. It's kind of like as if the whole scene was like on paper, and so that's what I like to do with this. However, if you want, you could also use UV or For example, like we unwrap this so we could use UV mapping, and it'll be baked onto it like that. But personally, I like to use a window. You could also try and use like generator, obviously, but usually you won't have good results with these. So, yeah, like as you can see, it's really bad. So you should either use UV if you unwrapped it, or just use window like me. Window is the simplest. You don't have to unwrap it or anything, and it just always works. It's really nice. So basically, let's just squash these together. Alright, anyway, so I'm gonna hit Control G again, as you could probably guess, to make this into another node group. And what I want to drag out here is the factor, so that we can customize it from outside. Or you might not want to actually do that at all. If you're the type of person that wants it to be so where if we have another cube and we give it the, new texture, and we delete this, and let me just name it really quickly. Hang on, let me name the group. Call it overall texture. Okay, so let me just demonstrate this to you really quickly. Okay, so if you're the type of person that wants it to be so that the factor is universal, you could leave it unconnected here. And as you can see now, when we adjust it, it adjusts for both of them. But if you drag this in here, then now it only adjusts it for one. I don't know, it's up to you guys what you want to do. But it's always going to be situation specific based on what you're working on. You might need more control or you might want less control, depending on what you're making. If you're making like a bunch of leaves, then maybe you want it to be so that when you affect it, it affects all of them. If you're making a character, maybe you want it to be so that you have more control, like I did here. So anyways, that's the overall texture there. And you can play around with the scale values if you don't like how it looks. So as you can see, this is already extremely powerful. We have something that's completely, what they call it procedural, I think, where when you have things that are, you can basically adjust one part and it'll all like update in a certain way. So as you can see now, we just have everything that we can just totally manipulate at all times. The next thing I want to add is screen space. I think it's called screen space ambient occlusion. I think that's what it's called. So basically, if you go here to the rendering tab, click on ambient occlusion, and what we can do now is if we add an ambient occlusion node, what I want to do is, if you shift click on it, you can't really see anything here, but if I add like a monkey or something, and I position it close to the object, as you can see, under where the shadow would be, we have a little bit of like darkness, right? Using this AO node, what I like to do usually is drag out a color ramp, set it to constant, and then if we shift click on this, we have something that's very harsh but also very adjustable. So what I like to do then is drag out a mix node yet again, switch it to multiply, and multiply it by this ambient occlusion mask that we made. So now as you can see, if we drag this up and down, we have the shadow appearing right there. So if I just put Suzanne like on top of the cube, you can see it's faint but it's there, and as you drag this, you can make it bigger or smaller as you want. Once again, you could probably guess, I'm going to put this into a node group, and I guess I'll drag out the factor over here. And we'll call this SSAO, which stands for like screen space ambient occlusion, I think. I might just be inventing terms, but I hope I'm not. So now we already have 6 layers already.